evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Spanglish Sports World English edition here on the Spanglish World Network and Single TV channels 249 and 250. I want to remind you to please go to the respective iOS and Android stores to download the Single TV app, where you will find extensive programming on from sports to entertainment and other areas. Remember as well that the application is completely free, so there is no reason why not to download it and just enjoy it. Once you have downloaded it and use it, please go back to the iOS and Android stores and please leave us a comment and a rating so that we can better understand the functioning of the application if the application is not functioning, and you can also give us tips on what programming do you want to see here on Spanglish Sports Network, on the Spanglish World Network. Remember that you can find Single TV as well on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Well, a big day in Blue Jays talk today. In the screen you can see of the Blue Jays fan club on Clubhouse, the newest application that is taking the world by storm. And below you probably will recognize him. He is Candid Frank Stanishi, one of the members of our staff here at Spanglish Sports World, and a renowned commentator on the CFL, the NHL, lacrosse, and many other aspects of sport. So, guys, the news day has started, and the first news of the day today with regards to the Blue Jays was the extension of the contract of the GM, Ross Atkins. It didn't come by surprise. We knew that with extension to Mark Shapiro of his contract, something was going to be worked around that he would stay too. So I want to first ask Jonathan. Jonathan, welcome to the show. How did you take this news? Because it's an interesting set of events.
Eduardo, I'd like to start by saying it's a pleasure to be here with you and Frank this evening. And it's an interesting time to be a Blue Jays fan. You and I got connected on the Clubhouse app, as you mentioned, and our very first chat was the night of the George Springer signing. And, that was a time of great excitement. And I think things have kind of rolled on with the ball club since then. We're off to an interesting start on the field, but I think we have to say at this point that Shapiro and Atkins have put us in a position where the team is competitive now. The farm system is stocked with talent going forward to the future. And the franchise is really in a position where we have to be proud of where we are at. So I think the extension, as you said, was inevitable, but it's also well-deserved. So personally, as a fan, it's nice to know that for the next 5 years, we're going to keep going on this trajectory. So I think, I'd rate it a B+, A- type of move, the kind of thing you need to do to keep being competitive.
So, Frank, from the perspective of continuity for the Blue Jays franchise, where do you think we can see the Blue Jays going from here?
Well, I'd like to say thank you for having me on as well, and it's a pleasure meeting our new person on the air here. I really appreciate meeting you. I've heard a lot about Clubhouse. I guess that's a good transition to baseball. I mean, it sounds like a baseball site, Clubhouse. Anyway, I wanted to make a comment where Ross Atkins, his contract runs a year past the president of the team, which seems kind of odd. I don't know whether that almost looks like or sounds like Ross Atkins is getting a guarantee from his GM in faith. I mean, that tells you something, that he has a 1 year longer contract. Now, as far as the way I agree 100% with the trajectory of the team. This is a team that made a lot of changes in a pretty short amount of time. And when you consider those changes, we're talking about some very big names with big contracts that have since left the Blue Jays, and they've really turned the team into a young club. And this year, they seem to be making a serious attempt. I mean, it'd be great if George Springer was playing, but unfortunately, he's been injured now. He's on his second, possibly his second injury. This is a team that was rebuilt. You look at Dunedin where they're playing their home opener. That's an incredible facility, and I don't even think facility calls for it. So the trajectory, Eduardo, with the signing of these two guys, I think the Blue Jay organization likes what the team looks like, the makeup of the team, and the organization with the gem that is that facility that they built in Dunedin. So, obviously this has been a relationship that's gone beyond building the Cleveland Indians, which is why they got here. They've shown that whether you like them or they're not really easily liked. I noticed that too. To answer that question about them, Ross a little more. The president, not so much. And a lot of people, when they first came here, there was a question as to who really was the GM. So it's actually worked out very well between the two men and, of course, this team and the fans.
So, as you said, Frank, when Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro landed in Toronto, there was a lot of mysticism with regards to what they could do. I was one of the first people, and I have to say, that criticized the move of releasing Alex Andropoulos from his position and not giving him a chance to continue on that legacy that he had built. And I want to point out directly that most of the talent that Mark Shapiro and Atkins are managing now was brought in and was scouted by the Andropoulos legacy. So, they had moves that weren't fan favorites. In the idea that when they came in, they released Edwin Encarnacion. Then it was Bautista out the door. They brought in Kendrys Morales, and he's no longer around. So it became a little bit of an issue with the fan base because they saw something that wasn't right. So with that being said, Jonathan, how do you think the Toronto fans are looking at the legacy that Mark Shapiro and Atkins are leaving behind for this organization? And we know with the contract that they are just extended to Mr. Atkins, it looks like he probably is the successor to Shapiro in going on as to the president of operations.
Eduardo, the question is a good one. And, I think there are two answers, right? On the one hand, to what you said about the fans, I honestly think the reason that Shapiro and Atkins partially had such a difficult time when they started was because of the level of success the team had recently had when Alex left. I mean, Alex was, almost a son of Toronto. I mean, literally in many ways. But that being said, I think the fans were more protective of what had been built. And I am kind of the belief if Shapiro and Atkins build this ball club and take us past the ALCS, which is where the Alex squad had gotten, that they will kind of take that place in history, and they'll become a loved bunch for having delivered us our own winner. But on the other part of your question, I think that the idea of the contracts being staggered, and this is something that came up in our clubhouse chat that you were a part of around lunchtime today, is really that somebody mentioned in our room that the two of Shapiro and Atkins have never really worked apart from each other. So maybe the way we should look at the staggering of the contracts is that as long as one of them is signed, perhaps it's like, they'll keep kind of caterpillaring off of each other. Because I don't know if Shapiro leaves Atkins behind unless he leaves the business of baseball altogether. And I'm interested in what the two of you think, considering they've traveled together throughout their careers.
Yeah. So it was me that mentioned that during the core conversation on Clubhouse, and they came together from Philadelphia. Then they came to Cleveland, uh, and it it looks like they don't want to split from each other, and they are using that that little how could his movements of working their contracts 1 year after the next to pressure the ownership to re-sign them. Uh, and I don't like it because we don't know who really is at the helm of the organization. In the case of Mr. Atkins, when he came to Toronto, he only had 4 years as a GM. It wasn't very, and he wasn't very productive. They never amounted to anything. It took them leaving Cleveland for them to make the World Series, which they lost, but but that's what happened.
Well, from my perspective, okay, sounds like okay. From my perspective, I think it's very important to understand that these two guys, as you all realize, have been together for a long time. Their intention is probably to stay together. I think what this does is it basically is, Ross Atkins getting the thumbs up, like I said, to take it a step further. Having an extra year means the GM can concentrate on his contract and not worry about who his GM is going to be. So I think it's a move that doesn't surprise me. Or they're just trying to throw out a screen to say, well, maybe we're not going to be together down the road. Maybe I'll be moving somewhere else. I don't think Shapiro will. I think these two guys work together, and they work well together. And I don't think until they actually win a World Series together, I don't think you'll see them split up. I think they've been together, building so close to that point that that's what they want to do together. And maybe if they win a World Series, they'll go their separate ways. But I don't think they will until they win a World Series.
So joining us now, we have another member of the Clubhouse crew at Blue Jays Fan Club. His name is Tyler Childs. And Tyler, welcome to Spanglish Sports World. We were talking just about the resigning of Ross Atkins. Do you care to entertain that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It's wonderful to be here. I think it's interesting, and I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion once you saw Shapiro's contract get inked for 5 years that Atkins wasn't going to be far behind him. I think it's a match made in heaven, right? I mean, you have Shapiro, who's the business guy. He does the PR stuff. He's the face, and they're trying to make Atkins that guy a little bit. But Atkins' specialty is player development, right? That was his specialty in Cleveland. And right as I jumped on, I had heard the comment about they didn't succeed until they left Cleveland, and all of that work was theirs. And although they didn't get the credit they deserved, they built that team from a development perspective. And so, you can see the returns already happening in Toronto. You see this young core of guys, and although one or two of them existed before this regime, the gross volume of talent coming is the result of drafts or trades that they have been a part of. So I think they're the right team to change the culture. And we've talked about this in the Clubhouse group a lot lately about changing that culture from, hey, we've got a window to win, to we're a developmental organization here for the long term. And in the AL East, that you need that mentality to compete with the Boston and New Yorks, because they make their problems go away with money. We don't necessarily, or we haven't up until now, had that luxury.
So let's touch on that topic because we know who the owner of the Toronto Blue Jays are, and that's Rogers Communications. And this season, during this off season, I was very disappointed because Rogers had said, "You have an open wallet. Let's go spend." And what they brought into the organization, I am not going to say that they were second-rate players, but they weren't caliber players until they signed Springer and Mario Kosinian. You know what I mean? Yates is was what happened to be a great pitcher, no longer until he gets back into shape. And then, Chadwick, I don't know where he came from. It's very, very obscure, the moves they made. There was a guy that they picked up, and now he is with Pittsburgh. He was released out of Florida and went to Pittsburgh, and he's doing great there right now. So I don't know. Where do you guys feel that the wallet have they stopped using the wallet and prefer to go through a trade mechanism?
Well, I don't know about everybody else, but I think they're more of a organization building tandem, both of them. The same way they run, the reason they have the head coach they do, the manager today, I should say, doing my football thing. The manager business with them is they wanted somebody that liked numbers. If you watch the Blue Jay games, the outfielders are always taking this piece of paper out of their pocket, and they're looking at this piece of paper. That piece of paper is telling them what the odds are, where the guy's going to hit, which way does it, all the answers are on that piece of projecting what a player will do. This is an organization that I'm not sure I dislike it. Really, what they're doing is it's sort of the next stage of Moneyball, where now you build a team according to statistics and you look for the players that fit best into that role. So really, Eduardo, I don't think the real issue for them is money as a team, but what they do and what they need to do, even though they can put together a really good team using statistics, using numbers, they still need to spend some money. So they've got to do a lot of the first and some of the last. And they may not have spent a lot of money by your definition, but they're spending the money specifically in a direction that they aren't successful in their build, even though they signed a guy after they had a guy in that position. So it's strange, but I think they're willing to spend money. But I agree with you. They're not the New York Yankees, though. They're not the Boston Red Sox. And one thing we've seen is we don't want them to be the Boston Red Sox, right? Right now, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think as Jays fans, I think we lose sight sometime of the biggest hurdle that they have in signing players, and that's getting them in Toronto. Now, years ago, it was a little bit easier because the Caribbean culture wanted to be in Toronto, right? But the money in the other markets has been an easier draw. I think, and you mentioned this, Frank, and just in terms of Marcus Semien is specifically, like, this is a guy that has very clearly been signed for to fill a gap, right? We have more middle infield depth coming, and I think they overpaid a little bit to get him there, but I think they did it very specifically to showcase that they're willing to make deals, right? Because I think for many, many years, Anthopoulos was the guy that said, listen, we're looking for the right deal, right? And JP Ricciardi, is as hard as he tried to bring in big guys, brought in the wrong guys, right? Like, we all know that, right? But I think we're back to an era where we're spending, but to your point, we're spending intelligently.
Ty, I think that's a really strong point, and I want to piggyback on that because, as you said, about Marcus Semien, the phrase that popped into my mind was statement of intent. because I remember Marcus Simeon happened after we had first come together in the Clubhouse app after Springer, and enthusiasm was already high. There were folks that night in the Clubhouse chat power ranking the Blue Jays, clear second place in the division. Folks were talking about, challenging the Yankees, and then you put a bat like that in the lineup. And I mean, he has been a lion's share of the offense that we've seen through the first week. But to the second half, I was actually going to respond to Eduardo's point by saying, I don't really think the problem they had this offseason was about the willingness to spend money. Trevor Bauer is not in Toronto because of a willingness to spend money. I don't think. I think there were circumstances like what you described, whether it's culture, whether it's perceived window for winning a World Series. That I mean, we did bring in arguably the number one position player on the market. So I think it's tough to say that it was not a statement of intent, which I certainly think the offseason was.
So let's touch another point in Blue Jays history today, because today marks the anniversary of the first game in Blue Jays history. And if we go back to those days, we had a pitcher in the mound for Toronto that by the name of Bill Singer, someone that wasn't what everyone expected, but he gave 4 1/3 innings of excellent performance. And today, on the other side of the coin, in Anaheim, at Arlington, we saw a team that didn't get the pitching that they wanted.
Well, I'll jump in really quickly here because I have a fun little thing about the first game. My license plate has J's 77 on it, and people always ask what the 77 stands for, and I always tell them that Jay-Z was born in 1977, and I get a lot of people on that joke. But it's definitely pitching. Pitching is going to be our topic all season, right? And whether it be in Texas or Buffalo or some other random location we get sent off to, we're going to have issues with that. The one thing that we do have, and I think people have overlooked this in these conversations, is although we don't have more than one inning eater in the Ryu conversation, we do have a lot of guys that can pitch very effectively for 3 or 4 innings. And I think that was part of what they designed this team to do this year, knowing the arm troubles that were going to creep up. I think they did it out of design, and I think a lot of people look at it as they did it out of not having the right guys. I think they know exactly what they're doing, and I think there's a reason we didn't sign Taijuan Walker, and I think there's a reason that we didn't go probably what we would have had to do above and beyond to get a Bauer. Like, I'm sure we had a number, but I sure that number got eclipsed when the Dodgers entered the picture. So I think the direction is fine, and we just need 3 months of the kids getting a little bit more seasoned before we start introducing them into the rotation.
The biggest wheel that has to turn, for the Blue Jays is Nate Pearson. He really does stir the drink for the GM and the president, the both of them. He is basically their hallmark card. He has to get healthy, and he has to be the player that he's projected to be. They worked on their bullpen based on that. They created a pretty good bullpen. The Jays have a pretty good bullpen, and you're right. They've got a lot of guys that can play or pitch for a handful of innings, which you need in the bullpen. They've got a pretty good starter. And I just can't imagine what would happen if the young pitcher turns out okay, because then you've got a 1 and 2 or 2 and 1, whichever way you want to look at it. And then you have an easier, road to fill in that 3, 4, and that sometimes 5 slot.
Frank, I think that's an extremely strong point. And when you look at where this ball club is and you compare it to our last window of success in 2015 and 2016, I always wonder why we don't talk more about the fact that we had Aaron Sanchez, Marcus Stroman. We had a number of homegrown pitchers exceed their expectations to really get us over the hump, in addition to what we had in the lineup. And here we are in 2021. We have a ball club with an A-plus lineup. So I think what's going to get us back to where we need to go is not just Pearson, but it's Anthony Kay, Alec Manoa, Simeon Woods Richardson. It's the exceeding of expectations, I think, makes the clock go faster for us.
Well, and I think go ahead, Eduardo.
No, go ahead,
I was
please.
going to say the one thing that I've thrown into the group in the clubhouse side of things, and we've talked about this a lot. I think one of the things, and Frank, your point leads into that. I think one of the things that's going to happen on this team is I think Pearson's going to end up in the bullpen. And I actually think Julian Merriweather is going to work his way out of that bullpen and into the rotation. Now, they both have great stuff, but I think when you look at arm health and what we've seen in Nate Pearson in the last 12 months, I think it makes more sense to take our risk on adding innings to an older arm in Merriweather. And I think you'll see that transition here over the next 6 or 8 weeks. I was expecting Merriweather to maybe get a little loose before Tommy Malone came in last night. I thought that might have been the perfect opportunity to get 2 or 3 innings under his belt and start that transition process.
Ty, can you say more for us about what you think that role for Pearson would be? Would it be like a 2-inning guy, or would it be like high leverage late inning stuff?
I think you have the options to do both, but I think if you're truly interested in the arm health of Nate Pearson, I think it has to be piggybacking. Like I think it has to be, and you look at Robbie Ray in his history and his twice through the order numbers are excellent, right? And so if you pair those two together, like that's a pretty dynamite combination, and you're going to rack up some big strikeout numbers and put some teams to sleep. So I think that's where I would like to see it go, because I just don't think Pearson is ready. Simply put, I don't think he's polished enough. The stuff's there. He's got it. It's not polished. It's like Casey Mize in Detroit, who also has great stuff, but isn't ready yet. Right. I'd like to see him get his feet wet in 2 or 3 innings as opposed to the pressure of making him get through 5 or 6.
Yeah, unfortunately, it burned his season off the contract and also his arm a little bit, right? I mean, it's arm protection. They've got to do that with him.
The problem with the Jays, and it's been an ongoing tradition with the Jays, which is it's horrible to say, is that they blow arms. They don't know how to manage their. Ever since Al Whitmer left the team, it seems that the pitching coaches that have arrived in Toronto tend to burn people's arms. They did that with Juan Guzman. They did that. They are doing that with Nate Pearson. It's a consistency that they see a young arm with finesse, and they try to overuse it. And I think it's time to start realizing that the game has changed. The game is not the same game that we were before in the 80s or 90s. They have changed the game for short duration pitchers and try to make them more effective. But when you have a Nate Pearson that they brought up to show him as the savior, that wasn't the right thing. Why didn't they do the same thing with Pearson that they did with Vladdy? They saved Vladdy for the following season. They brought Nate Pearson right up.
I think it was more Nate Pearson putting pressure on them. He was pretty public about wanting to start, wanting to play, and they gave into him. And unfortunately, young ball players, young athletes, I'll open it up to that. The young athletes learn the hard way. Sometimes the extra year that they're looking for can cause a little bit of a problem if they try to jump in too soon. You got to be ready for the big leagues. It doesn't matter what sport. It's rare that you have an 18-year-old that dominates a 19-year-old, but a pitcher at that age.
Yeah, but Frank, at this point in time, who is at the command at the helm of the organization? Is it the player or is it the organization?
Well, Eduardo, sometimes there's a gray area. Sometimes it seems the player kind of has his say, and please don't offend me. Burn that year off my contract. We see it in hockey all the time.
Are we not leaving out a key constituency, which is the fans?
Well, of course. And that, well, what pressure do you think a player puts on a team? Of course, I'm sorry, I didn't refer to the elephant in the room.
Well, and
No,
I think the other thing to consider too is signability, right? Like if you don't give some of these star guys a pathway to the majors, right, you end up with signability problems because the way the Major League Baseball draft is set up is definitely a roadblock for organizational success. But you mentioned the youth athlete thing, and I think there's an even more important part when you talk about arm health and long term development. If you look at grassroots baseball specifically, more than any other sport, arms are abused in a way that it's sickening how youth and amateur coaches use these kids. I mean, we've all seen it. We've seen a kid go out on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday morning of a tournament, throw 130 pitches, and then the next game you see him catching, right? And it's incredibly dangerous because those same teams are the ones that don't have throwing programs. They don't have good development and strength building that are required there. I mean, I grew up in an era where I pitched Friday night, I threw a full game, I caught Saturday morning, and then I usually pitched Sunday morning and relieved in the championship game on a weekend. That's what I have a rubber arm though, because that's where I had good strength development. Long toss programs were built into me from a very young age. And so it's the corner cutting that's happening because they're trying to get in the gym because they're trying to hit 3 digits, right? And that's the gap that we're not talking about the impact it has at the major league level. You look at guys like Clevenger who are facing injuries and other guys, they're all in the same boat here. So I think that gets overlooked when you look at major league development, how that long tail impact really settles into those programs.
I mean,
Well, maybe if the plan that the Jays have, which is throwing a lot of heat, having pitchers that throw a lot of heat, maybe the management of those arms, if they're throwing heat and it's something that they're accustomed to, you're not pushing them to do what they can't do. I mean, they're already pitching 95. Are you really worried about them pitching 99?
Nope.
You know what I mean? So that's one thing, Eduardo, I think, and sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you, but that's one of the reasons why they can maybe save what you're talking about, because you're right. But it wasn't just the Jays that were burning out arms. It was, it was the league. And Tampa Bay said, you know what, we're just going to throw guys out there to throw 95 and a couple of change-up guys, and then that's the way we're going to run our team.
Well, and
everybody's followed.
It's one pitch. It's the slider. Like the slider's the issue. Like everybody. It's a dominant pitch. It's a great pitch. But if you want to point to one thing in the major league level, that's the issue. It is 100% the slider.
well, you have multiple pitches that are thrown that hurt the arm. And one of the things that I always, when I go out to watch youth baseball or kids baseball, and I see a coach say, "Throw that curve," and I say, "Gee, guys, the kid is 9 years old. He should be throwing the curve." It doesn't work that way. You have to strengthen that arm and let it relax. And they say, "Oh no, but he's able to throw it very well." And I said, "Yeah, well, that's not what it's about. You don't want to take that arm and destroy it before it develops."
But it's true in youth baseballs where it starts, where the problems start, and they don't have any. There's no motivation for them not to burn out an arm because they'll just burn that arm, and then next year there's a couple of new arms that come up, and as a former pitcher that's the case. It's just basically an assembly line. And I hate to say it, but sometimes people are treated like numbers, and I think pitchers in minor baseball can tend to be treated that way.
Yeah, it's survival. It's just a battle of attrition is what it ends up being.
I got a chance to see great players when I played, and I grew up in Toronto playing Leaside in the Leaside League, and you saw great talent that never made it because they blew their arms out. And then I went on to college, and I saw more arms being burned because the pitching coaches were just interested in championships. They weren't interested in, oh well, if he makes it, he'll have a salary and the pension and this and that. And I say it's not about that. It's about the love of the game. It's about understanding how the players have to be developed the proper way. And it's sad. It's sad to say it. that happens.
It'd be nice if minor league teams were rewarded by major league statistics. I know that's too much to ask, but in reality, that's the issue: is that there has to be some sort of upside for minor league baseball. And we know, when it comes to AAA, they're all major league teams, really, right? Because they are going to pitch. They're going to teach their pitchers to pitch the way their big team wants them to pitch, and they want them to pitch. They want them to be able to pitch. But before they get there, if there was a way of rewarding, minor league teams for having success in the majors, maybe it'd be at least it would be a carrot to help protect kids and their future, because that's not what's at stake. I'm repeating myself. It today is all that matters in minor league baseball.
Well, and I think the one thing that you've seen shift recently, and they haven't made it all the way through this pipeline yet, but at the end of the day, they've shortened the development pathway for a major league team, right? They went to 4 levels. And for me, like as somebody that works across multiple sports, I see the long-term athlete development plan being implemented from the top down. They're setting the pathway for academy level teams in youth development leagues. Like that for me is the obvious progression. I think a lot of people have questions as to why they did what they did at the minor league level this year. And I think they're setting the table. The U.S. Hockey Development League has been really good for USA Hockey, and I think you're going to see that start to be the norm in the U.S. side of baseball, and then I think expand those same extensions into the Caribbean and in other parts of the world where they already have footprints.
So I want to touch on another topic that it's coming up at the end of this season, and that's the CBA, because it's going to be the battle of the ages. In the 80s and 90s, TV contracts were a major part of the situation of the factor, but it wasn't everything. This CBA, and with the latest contract signing by MLB with Fox and Bally Sports, it's going to destroy any type of compromise. I think we are most likely going to have a walkout or a lockdown or a lockout after this season. There was a contract signed by MLB with, as I said, with Fox and Bally Sports, and it was a 25-year deal, which they don't want to reveal the amount that these organizations paid, but it has to be very powerful when they handed also the regionality of the broadcast over to Fox as well. So I don't know where you guys stand on this, because it's going to be very dangerous. It's going to be a very dangerous conversation between the Players Association and the owners. And we just came back out of a pandemic, and now we are probably going into a lockout.
Yeah, I mean, this is a loaded topic, obviously, as you can imagine. I think it's interesting across all pro sport, not just specifically baseball. We've spent the last 20 years working towards a 50-50 balance of owner to player revenue, right? And like I don't know, and I'm a simpleton when it comes to this sort of thing. Like I think it should just be a very transparent 50-50. Let's be done with it. Like, let's just make that the standard. Let's stop playing this game. The owners take all the risk. They pay the bills. They need some margin and benefit. And the players produce the winning. They need to have a benefit themselves. So let's move away from dollars and let's move into percentages, right? Because that's smart money. And then when you look at somebody like a Pittsburgh who has gamed the system, well, the players are going to do something about that. If you have these entry level players that can find themselves in the middle of the market as opposed to the bottom, they're going to fight a little bit harder for that extra dollar. I mean, it's, as fans, like, wouldn't you guys want to see the last 30 games matter instead of Tank City? right? Like, I mean, that's what I want to see. I want to see them fighting tooth and nail for a job, and B, for that extra payday. And I want to know that they're showing up to the ballpark and wanting to play every day. So it's maybe a little too utopian, but at the same time, like that's the solution for sport, because then there's none of this back and forth, and then you have other deals outside of that just stay outside of that. We're done. That's my thoughts, at least.
So the NBA did it the right way. As we know, the NBA has a 50-50 agreement with their players. And you see more players now in ownership positions within the teams as well. So that makes a great bonding there between the players and the Players Association and the ownership of the teams, because everyone works for a common goal. Let's monetize this as much as we can without having the issues of trying to decide whether I should play, or the rule changes or anything. Everything is shared along the way.
Eduardo, I think both of you make really strong points. And, Ty mentioned the word simpleton, and I'm going to borrow that to describe myself when it comes to the details of the CBA. But one of the things I feel like I'm really in tune with is the idea of stakeholders, right? Because if we boil this down, the issue between baseball and the union, it's really not any different between a company like Amazon and its labor, right? And baseball is in a unique position, I think, among the sports, especially when you consider basketball, because basketball players, their numbers are smaller and their star power is bigger. Like the individual brand of the basketball player goes a lot further than that of the baseball player, for a combination of reasons: the popularity of the game, the size of the rosters, and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of interested to hear from the three of you about what you think about just like the difference in priorities of the two sides. The game needs to grow for everyone. The players in baseball already have a pretty good deal, and the owners seem intent on chipping away at that, regardless of what else goes on to the CBA.
I think the baseball players are more independent than any other sport. Players themselves are more prone to make a decision based on themselves than the other leagues. That's probably because it is such a diverse league. It isn't. If you look at basketball, and I don't mean to offend, right? But the black component in basketball is very important. It's very important, and it's a big part of the NBA. In the NFL, almost as much, but not quite. Baseball, you have it's a multicultural thing, right? And basketball, in a way, is becoming like that, because because if you only have one European on your team, but you only have 11 players, so even though you might not see as many European players compared to hockey, but you have a roster that's twice as small. So what I'm trying to say is there's a symbiotic relationship between all the players. There's a relationship, however it develops, whether it comes through junior, whether it comes through college, wherever it comes through. In basketball, it pretty much all comes through college. It comes through the same place. Even the imported players play in the same college. Look at our Canadians that play there, and then you have some Europeans that play there. People from communist countries that come there, from Africa, all that stuff, right? So they have a symbiotic relationship. They know each other, they like each other, and you know what happens when you hang out with the same people? You start to think like them. That's just, there's nothing wrong with it. That's just the reality of life, right? So basically, with baseball, they come from different directions, different places. So to hammer a deal, and the Major League Players Association, to me, it's a major challenge. It really is, for them to do something like that. But I agree 100%. If an owner isn't satisfied with 50% of what they bring in, then come on. I mean, really, what we're saying is the owners have the same value. And as you said, Ty, you're 100% right. And I'm not a rocket scientist. I'll use a different phrase. I'm not a rocket scientist, right? But I can tell you, half the money that Major League Baseball going to the players is a lot of money for the players, and it's plenty of money for the owners. It'll cover the ones that don't know what they're doing. Because, a lot of sports can't survive on a TV contract. I was introduced as a guy that's really into CFL. They rely on gate. None of those other leagues need gate. The reason why they can play during the pandemic, they really don't need fans to come in to not lose money. I want to make that clear. To not lose money. They can make money without fans. Of course, they'd rather have the fans in because they make even more money. So yeah, Ty, I just think it's difficult. In my opinion, I think it's just difficult to get the baseball players to rally together because I don't think they can agree on anything. If we haven't learned anything, it's all the battles they had to the pandemic season that they wanted to put together. It seemed like a nightmare to try and put it together.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the percentage model is something they should consider. And I mean, I think it'd be interesting to add some loopholes into it in terms of competitive balance, right? Like if you're an owner and you're not meeting expectations for bringing guys in or making deals, then there should be a penalty. And likewise, if you lose a certain amount of games, then the owners should get a benefit out of the player side. Like those little details, like, and again, they're going to fight tooth and nail over every inch of this battleground. Like, you know, I agree with the direction it's heading. Like it's headed for a lockout. Like the DH rule is not going to be the reason players aren't playing baseball next season. Like
yeah, hockey
So,
has. Sorry, Ty. Hockey has a thing where you have a floor. So they should have a floor and a ceiling. So they should have a window so that no matter which team you play for, there's a good chance you're going to be paid reasonably and you'll still be able to stay there if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to be a player that travels from team to team. But if you've got to go to New York to earn the kind of money you think you're worth or LA, that's the competitive balance is lost in that situation.
so one of the things that has been a sticking point over the last three CBA signings has been the pension for the players. Not in the sense of that they are not making enough money that they need a pension, but it's more of the players that get injured early in their careers are not getting compensated. And I can speak from root experience. I missed my pension by 3.5 games. So it's sad to say that because I didn't play in 3 games, that I don't deserve that pension, and that has been a sticking point in the CBA, and it's tough for some players, and that's what they've been fighting for, and the owners don't want to budge because they say we don't care about the past, we care about the present.
But Eduardo, isn't that up to the players as well? The players union,
It's not.
Okay. I think it should be. I think the players of today should fight for the players of yesterday because the players of tomorrow are going to have the same idea as the players of today. Because we all end up through time changing the position that we are and the contribution we make. And I believe that. Like I said, I think I have to keep relying on what I said before. Baseball players, more than in any other the leagues, they think for themselves for whatever reason. They're more uniform in that thought. But you're right, Eduardo. All the leagues, every league.
Can I throw a question back out to the three of you?
Yeah.
I think we all have similar thoughts about the way this is headed. But when Ty mentioned previously that he thinks for sure, and Eduardo said the same, that we're for sure headed to a lockout. That's not really something I had grappled with before. And can baseball handle a lockout? I mean, we talk so much about how baseball needs to grow. There are some exciting things happening in the game. They're leading in StatCast and some of the digital offerings and so on and so forth. But can baseball really survive? They're still kind of suffering from the last one.
You're right. I'm not so sure that they'll go into a lockdown. But like I said, I'm on the fence. I'm neither with you guys. I'm on the fence. That's where I am. I hope they're smart enough to realize it doesn't benefit anybody, and to get into a lockout after this, that's going to be extra irritating to fans. Now you're just pissing them off.
Well, I think it's really interesting too. Like the players' union has taken a very strong stance on almost every topic, at least in the media, since Tony Clark took over, right? And it's good that they have a backbone. Like they need it against the owners because we all know the owners are the probably the more likely, the more difficult party here. But I think a lockout would lead to a growth of an international product. I really believe that you would see an expansion of the game internationally from a Major League Baseball perspective during that window. It might speed it up. I think it's a destiny that's going to be realized at some point, an amalgamation of international leagues. I think that's coming, maybe a decade, 2 decades. It's coming. But I think that would be a strong push in that direction. Now, is it good for the game in North America? Zero chance. Like it's awful for the game in North America, and it's going to kill certain markets. You look at Tampa Bay, right? Tampa Bay can't survive the way they're headed right now financially without growth of the game in North America. So, there's things that are going to happen, and maybe that means new markets are introduced, but there's a lot of unanswered questions. So it'll be really interesting because this is going to be fought in the media. We've seen that already. So I think we're going to start to see that pre All-Star break, and I think it's going to be a huge topic around the All-Star break, and it's going to get ugly from there to the end of the season, I think.
Well, you guys talked about the fans and how they are impactful, and I just like Tampa Bay just can't. They're just drawing flies. They can't. They can't draw interest, and sometimes I think teams have to go where the fans are. Sometimes leagues think that just because they put a team somewhere, the fan build it and they will come. Ain't necessarily so.
Well,
So
and just look back to when Washington was in where they had played in Dominican, didn't they, for half a season? Like that was
yeah,
electric. Like there's nothing any fan wants to see more than a loud, noisy stadium. Like that is just so good for the game. And you see it in the World Baseball Classic. That's why I'm so excited about the future of an international product because it needs that influence.
the thing is, and they tried expansion. The last expansion period, it was supposed to be to Puerto Rico and Mexico, and it was blockaded by the owners. They said that it wasn't safe enough. It was the travel would be harder, and I said, hold on. How can you call it that the travel is going to be more difficult when it's just a Mexico? You put a team in Mexico, and they play in the National League. You put a team in Puerto Rico, and you put it in the American League, where it's an hour flight to Puerto Rico. You know what I mean? It doesn't, but they just don't want that expansion because it's so irrelevant to them because they want to control. They know that if the leagues move internationally, there is more possibility for deeper expansion than if they concentrate in North America.
The Jays in the Central Division because Puerto Rico comes into the Eastern Division, and we get rid of the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Or maybe we're looking at a Scotiabank North Division
Exactly.
before too long, depending on how they cut it up.
The Expos come back from Tampa.
Well, that's inevitable, and it's going to come back. But guys, that will be another topic. Maybe we can unite next week and talk about that. I want to thank you all for being here with me today. It was an exciting conversation. It was great. And I just want to thank you very much for being here. I look forward to our conversations on Clubhouse because it makes it very exciting every morning to think that we are going to meet and talk about the latest Jays game, and that doesn't happen often.
Eduardo, this was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Jay should have won today.
Absolutely.
So
without a doubt.
So I just want to let all our viewership know that this show can be heard also on the Spanglish Sports World Radio Network and its affiliates on social media. Please remember to go to our website, SpanglishSportsWorld.com, for all the news. There you will find great articles by our great hosts and columnists. And remember, Spanglish Sports World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, but especially live it, because Spanglish Sports World is sport, and sport is Spanglish Sport World. In the name of myself, Eduardo Harari, and our great guests, Jonathan Mason and Tyler Childs, this has been another edition of Spanglish Sports World here on the Single TV network, channels 249 and 250. And please, during these COVID times, please remain at home. Please remain safe in the comfort of your homes and your family. Until then, thank you very much. And we'll see you here again next week at the same time.
Good night, everyone.